Let us take, for example, the notion of time. Time, for most people, is the clock, the face of the clock, the physical movement. Or you can take the movement of the planet, the rotation of the earth, which makes a day, and then its revolution around the sun, which makes a year. Both of these are relegated to the physical realm. So when you think of time in its essential quality, it's a quality. And this question of time has been bothering people for many, many centuries. And two names which come are Parmenides, and the Greek, and his student Zeno. And these are pre-Socratics, that means they lived before the time of Socrates, but their ideas were then incorporated by Plato in his dialogues, and then later on by Bergson in our own time. Bergson is French philosopher. Up till the 1920s, he was considered the greatest philosopher in Europe. And later on, he had a debate with Einstein on the nature of time. And in that debate, it seemed that Einstein was superior to Bergson, his understanding of time, relativity of time. But later on, when quantum people began to understand quantum physics, they realized that Bergson was actually more accurate in his understanding of time. So this is one background we are given to Narayana Guru saying that there is no birth, there is no death. These are all phenomenal aspects. And he says what really exists, everything is Chit Prabhavam Ellam. That is what he says. Pure mind stuff or pure consciousness is all that there is. That is the ultimate reality. So if you want to meditate on something, you meditate on Chit Prabhavam Ellam. That means it is your own consciousness which is shining as the world outside. It is your own consciousness which is operating as your thoughts inside. So subject and object. These are the two realms that we have. So percept and concept. You can say the perceptual world. And the perceptual world you put outside, this world that we see out there with the trees and hills, etc. And then there is a conceptual world, that is, we experience it within us, and that is of concepts, names. So every object you have has its corresponding name, and so name and form, these form the basis of our experience. But what he's saying is that these two are basically arising from a more fundamental consciousness, which is Chit Prabhavam Ellam. And that consciousness does not have any such participation, or it does not appear to be part of, it is not part of this changing world. This is the changing world, the phenomenal world, where things have a cause and effect. So there is a causality there. In the causality, there is a chain of cause and effect relationships. One cause leading to an effect, and then that leading to that effect becomes a cause, and then so on and so forth. So what we are experiencing in our life is a chain of cause and effect, which when we see it retrospectively, it becomes the past. When we see it prospectively, it becomes the future. So imagination is future, memory is the past, but its reality is only an eternal present. What exists all the time is an eternal present. That is all. That is the Chit Prabhavam. It is an eternal present. In that eternal present, we construct with this cause-effect chain a prospective future and a retrospective past. This is the basic import of the verse there. Of course, in the norm that Miyako-san was reading, there is this mention of the Procrustean, we already said that, the Procrustean bed, where he is critical, he's always being critical of the scientists. So he talks of scientists using this method to stretch or cut things according to their should fit into their epistemology, into their mold, so to speak. And even Arthur Eddington, a great scientist like Arthur Eddington, who was partly a philosopher also, he was able to perceive this. So there are some scientists who are bridging the gap. The Schrödinger is another scientist who was also bridging the gap between science and philosophy in those days. In modern times, we have Fritjof Capra and Gary Zukov and others, Dancing Woody Masters and Tao of Physics. And now we come to Irving Laszlo. He talks of Akashic field, the presence of the Akashic, the third realm of information. So not only matter and energy, but also information. So he's introducing the third aspect. So we can see how even in the world of science there's been considerable developments to include this aspect of consciousness. When you come, Bergson laid the foundation where he pointed out that time as a quantity is the biggest mistake, which is coming out of science because of science's need to quantify, the need to measure. And to measure you have to quantify. And that quantification of time makes it space-like, and that's an error. Bergson pointed out that time is a quality, and therefore it should not be put in a quantified fashion. So these are some of the background thoughts in the context of which this Atmopadesa Satakam is being studied, keeping in mind these difficulties of the concept, the scientific world. Because before pre-science world was largely religious mind, a religious world. And if we take the Western course of thought, if we take the history of thought, it's Parmenides and Zeno, pre-Socratics, then Thales, and then Socrates. From Socrates it takes a kind of a moral twist. Socrates never wrote anything, but his words are put into through Plato in his dialogues, and then he's followed by Aristotle. Plato divided the world into intelligibles and visibles. So one is the world which we see with our sense organs, that is the world of opinion and sensation. And then we have the world of understanding, that is the intelligible world. So this higher understanding or knowledge, realization comes to us through the intelligible world. That is, intuition works there. So he divided the world. Then he was followed by Aristotle. Aristotle had a very famous student called Alexander the Great. And Alexander the Great used to send him specimens from his conquests. So Aristotle organized the world of science that you see. So you can say that the sciences we are studying now are based on the divisions Aristotle made. He made the division of physics and metaphysics. It was around Aristotle's time. That is followed by the church. When once the church came, they closed all the Hellenistic schools because it became based on faith only in the Bible. And the theologians, so you had people like St. Augustine, and then later Aquinas, these two great theologians who then gave Aristotelian meanings to the universe, to the fundamental questions, which were disproved by, when Kepler and others started actually studying the universe, they found that all of Aristotle's views were all completely wrong. But they didn't have the courage to speak it out because the church would persecute them. But later Galileo, and then before them Bruno, and all these people came, and gradually they found your scientific knowledge started becoming established. And once science started growing, and it was in its heyday in the 20s and 30s, science was really at the peak of its glory, and people thought that everything could be solved by science. And religion had been sort of cast aside, and philosophy had died completely. So science became the dominant force. And so here we are trying to use this science, this methodology, whatever the defects, science has a great advantage of being universal, and its methodology was quite helpful. So the Rajaguru is taking that scientific epistemology, scientific methodology, and using it to understand the Vedanta. In India, Vedanta has again very old Vedanta from Badarayana's time. Then you have Badarayana, Kalidasa, Shankara, Gaudapada, Govinda, Shankara, like that. You have a long paramparas. And then post Shankara, you have Sureshwaracharya, Mandana Mishra, and all these people. So you have a long list coming down from the Shankara tradition. Shankara tradition brought Advaita Vedanta. In between you have the Buddhists. So you had a pre-Buddhist Vedanta and a post-Buddhist. So Gaudapada was writing his Mandukya Karika, based on which Shankara wrote his Advaita Vedanta. So Advaita, then that is followed by Ramanuja, who disagreed with Shankara's idea of Maya, and he brought Vishishtadvaita. Vishishtadvaita qualified non-dualism, and he allowed a little bit of ritual to come into the practice. In Shankara's Advaita, there is no ritual. He clearly said, by karma you cannot get salvation, only with jnana. So he put the emphasis on knowledge. Ramanuja brought in a little bit of devotion. So he said, yes, you can pray. For him it is Nirgun Brahman. For Ramanujan, Brahman has some gunas. And that comes down then to Dvaita of Madhva. These are the three main paramparas we have in India. And Narayana Guru is following Shankara. Shankara's Advaita is Narayana Guru. So Narayana Guru is saying, I am continuing the Shankara of Vedanta, of Shankara's Advaita, but I will modify it to include Madhva and Vishishtadvaita. So he gives a more broader, comprehensive vision. So he is what is known as a unifier. He is a great unifier. So in this context of unifying, he tweaks the pramanas, the epistemology, so that even the scientific knowledge can be included in the understanding of Vedanta. And thereby he balanced that kind of little bit asymmetry that existed both in the scientific world and in the Vedantic world, of too much emphasis on the visible external and too much emphasis on the internal. So there's adhyasa and upadhi. These are the two limiting adjuncts. Upadhi is all the physical bodies that we see, and adhyasa is all the mental projections we make. So because of that, this pure consciousness, this chid that we have, that chid gets muddled, it gets muddied. And therefore the process of purification is to bring back your awareness of the pure consciousness. In theory it is very easy, in practice it becomes difficult, because the pulls of the world, the pulls of the physical body and the pulls of the senses and the karanas are such that they always create problems. So that is why we were chanting Shanti, Shanti, Shanti 3 times. That is the Adhi Bhautik, Adhi Daivik, Adhyatmik, the 3 sources of our troubles. One is the cosmology, the cosmos, this environment, that is the Adhi Bhautik. And then there is nothing is going wrong, but in my head I start imagining all kinds of things. So that is Adhyatmik, self-generated problems. And the third is the Adhi Daivik, the fate, the problems of luck and things which are outside our control. So we say, may we have peace from our environment, may we have peace from our own mind, and may we have peace from sources outside us. So basically that is the structures. So if you put things in proper structures and look at it in an organized way, it makes a lot of sense. Otherwise it's very confusing and very muddled. Therefore a good thing to do is to make a proper frame of reference in which you can put all these different categories of knowledge that we have. The scientific way of understanding, the philosophical way of understanding, the religious way of understanding, the theological way of understanding brought by the Abrahamic traditions, who have this notion of God sending a prophet and giving moral laws, commandments, to the pagan Vedic concept of celebration of life, celebration of creation. And nothing is bad, all creation is good, all nature is good. to Abrahamic idea of where nature is made for the service of human beings, and it has led to so much of confusion and you may say exploitation. So we can divide them into more contemplative, like Taoism, Buddhism, and what comes to be Hinduism, in one category. They are contemplative, they share many ideas, and then there are the Abrahamic religions which also share the same prophetic kind of idea. And then there are the scientists who are not believers, they don't believe. They are empiricists who believe in inquiry, and they're curious and they do research and they come to their findings. And then there are the mystics and the philosophers who try and understand. To a great extent they succeed in understanding the nature of the world. So basic two questions, ko aham and kuto jagat. This is who am I, and this is whence the world, how did the world come to be. These are the two fundamental questions. Anywhere you look, in any philosophy, any religion or any science, these are the fundamental questions that people ask when they become conscious beings. These are the questions which are arising in their minds. In the case of who am I, the Upanishad says Tattvamasi. We were reading this Upanishad which gives the Mahavakya, Tattvamasi, Tat, Tvam, and Asi. So that gives you the key. That is the Upadesha Vakya. It means you are already that. What you are looking for or what you are seeking, you are already that. Don't expect to find something somewhere else. It is your own self that is seeking itself. So sort yourself out and you will discover it. So that is the advice they give you. Why Vedanta gets close to science is because their methods are very much alike, and it is possible to correlate them. And I believe that is what Nataraja Guru is trying to do, and show us a way where we can take the advantage of both the scientific method and the wisdom of the Vedanta. And so he calls it an integrated science of the Absolute. That is what some people like us are trying to study. You have to just start, slow and steady.
Science is trying to choke their views according to their understanding.
Yeah, but that's a physicist's view.
Yeah.
He's a physics person.
Is it not that Vedanta, because science is a never-ending process, it goes with time and time. And Vedanta is there from long time, which is static, which doesn't change. So if we try to include the scientific explanation that fits into Vedanta, is it not a belittling certain things, like what I say is another way of chopping the science to fit into Vedanta?
Not really. This is the subject here is epistemology. Epistemology means the theory of, first of all, epistemology means that two theories have to be matching.
Okay.
So science's methodology, the approach of science to the way in which it studies is being appreciated.
Yes.
So there is no doubt about that. So the scientific method is being accepted and is being used to study Vedanta subject. Whereas Vedanta's success at the metaphysical level is also being appreciated, where the scientist gets limited. So Vedanta can expand the scientist's vision, and science can improve the way in which Vedanta is understood. So they actually complement each other. They're mutually helpful. Not the Procrustean thing was his joke. This is Eddington's joke.
No,
Eddington was making a comment in that time about how in his time, because they could not admit any kind of metaphysics in their thinking in those days. Now we have science, physics has traveled a lot. This is back in the 40s and 50s. In those days they could not imagine anything a priori coming in science. So in fact the first few chapters of the book we read is describing all the great problems with the a priori in science. So science could not accept anything a priori, which means they could not accept anything coming from a mystical dimension. It had to be a posterior, it had to deal with things that you could see, perceive, empirical. You had to measure, you had to see it, you had to measure, you had to observe it. It's when quantum physics started coming in, when you found that the observer observed, boundaries started dissolving. For example, when you do the particle and wave experiment in particle physics, when you observe, it functions like a particle. When you don't observe, it's functioning like a wave. So just by merely observing, looking at something, you have altered the experiment. So where is your empirical objectivity there? There is no objectivity. Subject-object start interacting. So that is what the Vedantins are saying, that there is no objectivity as such. The subject and object are actually two sides of the same coin. You cannot have anything purely objective. Eddington is trying to say the same thing. He realized the same thing, that there cannot be an object as an object purely objective. There is a subjective element that is there in the objective, so-called objective dimension also. So this is one level where you find that Vedanta
being expressed through the objective.
Yeah, there is a subjective quality in that object. You cannot have a purely object. That pure objective thought it's not possible. Because the language of religion is symbolic language. Okay. You have to understand that this was born at the time when the language they were using is mythical and symbolical. Today we have lost the way to think mythically. We cannot think symbolically. This is symbols. So when they say lotus, what is this? It's a symbol. When they say the blue of the god is bluish in color, it is a symbol. When Krishna is playing the flute, it's all to be interpreted symbolically. See the Mahabharata, Dhritarashtra, Arjuna, Krishna, all of it is a symbol. Dhritarashtra means that person who is blind, the king who is blind. That means it is the blind spot in a human being, the prejudicial mind. Arjavam is straightforward. Arjuna comes from Arjavam, straightforward. So it is the righteous part of us which feels disturbed when we see injustice. We think, no, this is not right. This is not something that's not right here. No, we don't feel comfortable. That is Arjuna in us. And the Krishna in us is that which is showing and seeing this Chit Prabhavam, the higher consciousness, which has the ability to show and see at the same time. So you have, supposing you realize a higher truth. Now your problem will be how to communicate this to your fellow human being, if you feel like communicating. So it is in that context that a symbolic language was created in those days, mythical. It had its correspondence with consciousness only. Asura Devas were what? The personification of one's qualities. If you read the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, there is the Asura. Prajapati creates three kinds of beings. The Devas, the Manushas and the Asuras. And it is time for them to leave the Prajapati's their home and go out again. So they ask him for the final teaching, and he gives it by the thunderclap, da, da, da. And then he asks the Devas, you understood? And Devas said, yes, damyata, control, self-control. Then he asked the Manushya, they said, da, ya, datta, dana. And then he asked the Asuras, they say, ya, daya, compassion. Now the Devas have a hedonistic tendency. They like to enjoy. They don't know how to stop. So they have to learn damyata, control. The Manushyas are greedy and coveting, and they are always wanting. So they should learn dana, datta, to be generous and to give. And the Asuras are cruel. So they have to learn daya, the compassion. Then it will tell you this is actually one human being's qualities. So through the symbol they were teaching the human being's psychology. So Jung brought that out, collective unconscious and the archetypes. That it is one's inner story that is expressed outside. And then the symbol helps them to understand themselves. So when you go listen to a Purana, the story is a story, but why does it bring a relief? Because the story is the story of your life. The listener will identify the incidents in that as, oh, this is my consciousness working like that. So it was a symbolic language. The Guru is not doing anything like that at all. He is going purely on scientific principles, not trying to show religion into science. He is saying Vedanta into science. Vedanta is not religion. Please don't confuse Vedanta with religion. Vedanta has nothing to do with religion. So it's a kind of a poverty of spiritual understanding, that this void that has been left out, because again we were talking about it, the absolute that has been lost, left a vacuum. So it's that methodology which he wants to introduce into Vedanta. He said Vedanta should stop this internal looking which Shankara introduced. He gave the example of a pot. Imagine a pot with a lamp inside. You make 5 holes in that, and the light from the pot will be going outside. So that is his idea, that consciousness inside is streaming out. This whole world is a creation of your consciousness, adhyasa, adhyaropa, a snake in the rope, etc. So the Vedantins believe that the outside world doesn't exist. It's all your creation. You have projected this. Scientists believe the opposite, that the metaphysical world doesn't exist. But light falling, sensation. From sensum it is going into your brain and transforming into visual cortex, and there are fantastic studies now with this MRI scans. Now you can make out exactly which neuron is firing, which neurotransmitter is going, which is the pathway and all that. But that doesn't explain where consciousness comes from. Consciousness is the big issue now. Where does consciousness arise from? So there science is stumbling. And science needs the help of this mystic, this Vedantic side, of people who have studied consciousness, whether it is a Buddhist or the yogis. They have sat and meditated on it for centuries. They are fully aware. They know exactly how that consciousness works. How from one consciousness it becomes Chitta Chaitanya Chetana, they say. Pure consciousness becoming Chetana, your function, the Antakarnas, Man Buddhi Chitta Hankara, and then it becomes Chetana, sensation. So one consciousness is transforming in quality as it moves from inside to outside. And so the idea is to go back into its pure state. That is what you are doing when you meditate or do any kind of yoga, is you are withdrawing that consciousness from where it gets scattered. But the senses are scattering. It's like a prism. Your white light is getting made into 7, and then those 7 combinations are making into 7 million combinations. Similarly, one consciousness, when it goes through your mind faculties, it splits into this Man Buddhi Chitta Hankara, 4 ways of functioning. Or if you look at Mandukya, into what are the fundamental states? We have dream, deep sleep and wakeful. That is all 3 states we are always going around. That's all. Sushupti, Jagrat, Swapna. Everything can be put into these 3 states. You wake up in the morning, and then you get your time-space frame of reference comes in, and then your vasanas start functioning, and you are supposed to run here and there. It's all coming from your vasana only. So what is the yogi doing? Vasana kshaya, no? Yeah. To reduce the power of the vasana so that you become more pure in your consciousness. Then you start experiencing what these people are talking about. See, Krishna and Arjuna are together. Krishna never teaches him anything till Arjuna says, I am confused now, please help me. Then he starts his preaching. He could have preached to him right in the beginning itself. No? They're together for so long. But he's just acting like a friend, like a buddy. Only when that Guru-Shishya relation, it changes into that, then the Vidya starts. So Nataraja Guru is very clear. He keeps scientists as scientists and keeps that discipline as a scientist. He was a scientist himself. He studied zoology, he studied proper scientific disciplines in the laboratories and experiments and everything. And so he was familiar with science. And then as a disciple of Narayana Guru, he was familiar with the mystical side also. So he was thoroughly qualified to integrate those two, because he had PhD from Sorbonne University. So he was mingling with all the great thinkers of Europe, post-second, between the world wars and all that. So he saw the ferment, actually witnessed this great shifting of consciousness going on. He was in the middle of it. So he was really in that time of great shifting in the thinking of the world. when this Eastern thought was going to the West and Western thought was coming to India and the East. So it was a great crossover. You can't just promiscuously mix. In the name of modernity, you just start mixing up things. And fusion, no?
Yeah.
Like fusion music, you just mix. It sounds very good, but it has no real substance. So to get to the substance, you have to. So as far as Vedanta is concerned, definitely the Upanishad, the Shruti has to be the basis. You cannot deny the basis of the Shruti. That is the root, and that is, we have to feel blessed and we have to feel very grateful that these people left that much of body of knowledge for us. All we have to do is start relating with it, and that gives us the Shruti part. Then on the other side you can do your scientific research, and then intelligently you will start seeing the correlations between the two, where they meet, where they don't meet, so that you need a frame of reference, the overall frame of reference. Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.